Hey everybody, thanks very much for joining us. My name is Tim Palmer, I'm the Artistic Director of the World Percussion Group, and we are very honoured to have John Psathas here today to talk to us a little bit about his musical journey, his compositional concepts, and also a little bit about a really exciting project the group, World Percussion Group, have been working on virtually, Cool Insane, which is one of his newest pieces, I believe. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us this early in the day.
It's a real pleasure to be here, Tim, and I have to thank you first and foremost for saying my name so well.
Thank you. I did do a bit of research, I have to say. I could have said Yanis as well, but that would be the next level, right? So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. As well, we've got Jose Uzagate and Torio Azolini Machila. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And John, I thought maybe sort of tell us a little bit about your journey sort of from the early years of composition. I know one of the milestones probably for you was sort of writing the music for the Olympics early in sort of 2000s, and maybe some of the inspirations along the way and where your inspirations come from, really. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I probably can frame the answer to that around percussion itself, because I went to university to be a performance piano major, and I suppose a bit by accident, I also did a composition major, and I found out very quickly that I'd much rather be writing my own music than learning the music of others. You know, that was the kind of very quick thing I learned. And then I'd spent quite a few years at university doing postgraduate composition study, and something amazing happened just as I finished university, which is an emerging young percussionist from the UK was visiting New Zealand in the early 90s and was playing at one of our arts festivals and had been open to including a work by a New Zealand composer. And I'd just finished a piece, my first piece for percussion, which was for percussion and piano, a piece called Matrix Dance. And that emerging percussionist was Evelyn Glennie. And it was just at the very beginning of her career when she was really taking the world by storm.
Yeah.
You know, it was an incredible journey to witness. But Evelyn came to New Zealand, and with Philip Smith, they performed Matrix Dance, and Evelyn liked it a lot. The piece kind of worked really well for her and her setup and traveling. And she played that piece a lot, like really took it to the world. And because of that, that's really how my international profile was launched. It was through the advocacy of Evelyn's for Matrix Dance. And because I was young and kind of enterprising, I then went to Evelyn and said, well, why don't I write something especially for you? Because this wasn't written for you. And I wrote another piece called Drum Dances. And following on from that, I wrote a concerto called View from Olympus for Evelyn and her pianist, Philip, a kind of double piano percussion concerto. And those were the big early opportunities that in some ways launched me. So I have a huge amount to thank Evelyn for. And then my music started to enter into the repertoire of percussionists. And so now, if you fast forward almost 30 years, you have a piece that Jose is learning, One Study, One Summary, which is another piece that's being played a lot. It's kind of taken off. And I have to say all of this, I have to qualify it all with the fact that I can't play a tambourine in time. You know, I'm not a percussionist by any sense of the word. It's kind of remarkable that I've spent so much of my life writing for percussion. And just now, the last few months, had some incredible big premieres of new large-scale percussion works. And I don't even know how to hold sticks. You know, I don't know anything at all in that way. But I guess I have an intuitive understanding of a certain amount of how percussion works. So that's kind of the nutshell journey. It's been wrapped around a whole lot of writing for percussion. And of course, from that, other things have happened, other chamber music, other concertos, other kinds of like film scores. And I suppose the only other tangent to that is that over the last 15 years or so, I've started working with many percussionists from different cultures. So not the notated learn in an academy journey, but like Iranian bandir players or the dumbek players from Greece, Turkey, and the Middle East. You know, tabla, amazing tabla musicians. You know, from all around the world. I've been lucky enough to have projects that have enabled me to work firsthand with them, which I have to say usually doesn't involve notation or a score of any kind. It's a different way of working. Yeah, so it's generally a journey of percussion. That's the answer to your question.
Yeah, great answer. And just to funny enough, one of the first pieces I actually learnt was matrix dance many years ago at college. So yes, quite a challenging one, especially with the piano, like the interlocking rhythms as well. It's quite challenging. Yeah, and I think Evelyn has done remarkably well for the whole industry. Like so many composers are in the same position. Like Ney Rosario, for example, would probably say exactly the same thing. Like she's taken his music and given it a platform to showcase that. So and definitely sort of listening to your music, you have absolutely a real sort of affinity for the blend of percussion, and a lot of your music has, from what I've listened to anyway, has sort of world music vibes within that as well. So and I think it works really well, particularly with sort of the backing track concept as well, which is quite popular at the minute. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. Guys, have you got a question you want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple.
Yeah, go for it.
We can do one each.
Yeah.
So first of all, I was just wondering about your composition process and where do you actually start? Do you start usually like maybe experimenting with electronics, or do you start more with the piano, with the actual parts which will be played by instrumentalists?
Okay, so that's a great question. I try to work with the least amount of limitations creatively, so that it's kind of wide open. But I've been super lucky in that since I was in my last year of university, which is a long time ago now, until present day, I've been commissioned like continuously, so every year it's been full of paid work. And what that means is that every piece I've written starts with a couple of very specific limitations. One is a duration, like I'm told this is the length of the piece that we would ideally like, and the other is the instrumentation. So those things are generally decided before I even think about what kind of piece it's going to be. But other than that, it's wide open. And my way of working has always been with technology. So I've always had a computer and sequencing software and libraries. And you can imagine, or maybe you can't, but if you go back 30 years to how primitive all that was back in the early 90s to what it is now with the most incredible resource if you're using that technology. So what I'll do is, in terms of the compositional process, is I will sit down in front of my computer. I have a piano, I have a desk with manuscript and pencils, and usually nothing, like no idea. I try and just be completely clear. And then I will spend a really long time just getting the first gesture or the first bar or the first thing. So Jose, you're playing one study, one summary. So that very first thing that happens at the top, that kind of B flat minor thing that starts it, I spent a long time just getting that thing, which is kind of interesting if you look at the openings of so many of my pieces, like Matrix Dance. It starts as an octave on the piano down the bottom, and the drums playing in unison with it. They're kind of nothing ideas. There's hardly anything there. But it's a bit like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the opening motif of that 4-note motif. That's not a piece, that's not a melody. What is that? It's a rhythm and an interval. But what it is it's absolutely laden with potential. And so I try and find opening ideas that I can sense could go in any number of ways, and they have a kind of nascent energy within them. So many of the pieces I've written, the way they start, you can feel in the first bar a very strong sense of energy and impulse. And the thing is, because I've been doing it for so long, what I get out of writing music is discovering what the piece is going to be, because I don't know when I start. It's actually learning what the piece of what's the word? It's like unwrapping something, over a period of months and seeing what's inside the box. So that's generally my approach, which is quite a vague one, but it's really all about organic creation. It's like you plant a seed and it just sort of grows in its way, and you're there to pour water on it to make sure it gets sunlight, to make sure nothing destroys it as it's becoming stronger and more distinct. Very, very hard to teach that to anybody. You know, it's a very kind of personal way of writing.
Mhm. Oh, well, thanks very much.
Jose.
Yeah, so for the past like 10, 20 years, there have been so many percussion pieces, especially with electronics. And what do you think is the role of electronics in the contemporary repertoire? And is it more to replace something or just to add an extra element?
Well, it's both of those. It's that with one study, one summary. If you think of all of the sounds that are in that backing track, even if you had them played live with synths and whatever, it's so many people you'd need to actually do that. So it's a way of bringing a very large ensemble into one space. There's that, and the other thing is that because the marimba for me is a very hard instrument to write for, because of the very contained palette that it has of sound. You know, even if you go into using the flip end of the sticks or hitting the bars with the sticks or doing other things, it's still a very compressed amount of colors, in the marimba. So I find that very hard to work with, and that's really how it started. It was one study, one summary. I thought, well, actually, I want to grow the sound world of the piece, and I just found it incredibly liberating. But then the other thing about the electronics is, ensemble-wise, like for you to rehearse one study, one summary, it's just you and you press play on your computer or your phone, and it's all there and you're playing. You don't need to organize rehearsals. You don't need to hope that everyone you're playing with is always going to be in time and tight. It's there's a whole lot of it that's absolutely guaranteed. And I've found that that's also not popular, but it's very much appreciated in the sense of the players that are learning the music. So there's that. I mean, the tricky thing about writing music with playback is that I'm not a producer. I'm not somebody creating music for the dance floor or for radio stations. I don't have that kind of knowledge, and I'm not musically inclined in that direction. It's a different way of using the technology. Yeah, so it's finding that middle ground where it's still kind of composed, through composed. It's not just repetitive loop-based kind of stuff, but it's very much in that world. There was something else I wanted to say about it, which was about the live performer plus playback. The thing I discovered immediately on writing one study, one summary is that the live player has to be the main storyteller of the music, always in those situations. Because I've been to performances of pieces with playback where the player might get 8 bars rest, or they might start doing something very simple while the playback is doing something huge and incredible. And there's a weird kind of switch off that happens in the audience's experience at that moment, because the sonic energy doesn't match the visual energy.
Yeah.
You might have seen it at big events where there are laptop artists, and they might be big like house music concerts or whatever, and they'll press enter on their laptop and the world explodes. Like, it's incredible. It's this amazing moment. But then they have nothing else to do. And this amazing sonic energy is coming at you, and there's no actual performance going on. So I'm hyper conscious of that, which is probably why you play so many notes in one study, one summary. It's to keep you as the foreground storyteller always. And are you using, like when you play it, Jose, are you using the junk? Like, do you have the junk percussion in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know if you've seen, but there are videos of people that have played it where they just sit out the junk percussion bit and they let it happen. And that's okay, but there's a section where there's like, I don't know, 10 bars, 20 bars, where it's just the junk. And that's always, to me, it's always been a bit deflating when the performer just basically stands there and lets the robot play the music. So it's a huge consideration in the writing of this kind of music.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah.
You got one more.
So I'm just wondering, since you've been, I feel quite pioneering in the world of percussion music. You've written quite a lot of the blockbusters. But where do you see contemporary music going next? And if obviously what you predict doesn't have to be positive or negative. I'd also like to know, what would you like to see next?
Great question.
Yeah, a great question. I'll answer the second part of it first, which is what I'd like to see next. particularly in the context of percussion, which is really where I spend most of my time, is I've spent a lot of time working with what I would call classical percussionists, and I've spent a lot of time working with what we might call world percussionists, or non-Western. I'm not quite sure what label is the right one, but I know you know what I mean. What I would really like to see is those things come together more, because I think that percussion, more than anything, because it's based on a kind of a universal fundament of rhythm learning, whatever the tradition that it's coming out of, there is more potential in percussionists coming together across cultures and different traditions than there are in probably any other kind of instrument. Maybe the voice is the other one, but I would like to see a lot more of these cross collaborations happening between percussionists from the African continent, or from the South American continent, or the Middle East, with people like yourselves that have gone through and learned all of this amazing kind of notated work, and it's a different kind of learning, and I think there's a lot to be gained. I've done a bit of it. There's a lot to be gained from those things coming together, and I think it's amazing new territory to be exploring. It is happening, but it could happen way more. So that's what I'd love to see happen. That's what I'm hoping will happen. In terms of contemporary music, contextualize that. I was a student of composition. I started in the 1980s, right, which is like millennia ago now, given the rate of change of everything. And when I started composing, it was almost illegal to write music that was in a key. It's almost like you got a fine, that you had to pay for writing tonal music. And now, I mean, what I see happening, and what I hope keeps happening, is the liberation of the creative voice, so that composers, whether they're university educated or self-educated, are increasingly free to simply say what they want to say through music, using whatever materials they want. And the reason I think this is the time for that to happen is because we can disseminate what we do in a way that's never been possible before. And I talk to my ex-students, because I used to teach at university. I talk to them about audience building a lot. And I said, there are probably 100,000 people that will like your music, but they're probably in about 150 different countries. And you have to kind of find them. You have to embark on this journey of finding the people that like what you do, not changing what you do to generate an audience. And I mean, that is more and more the world that we live in, and I hope that increases, because I think what it will result in is an increasing amount of authentic and sincere music, which is the important thing of all, that it matters and that it means something to the person creating it, and to the person playing it, and to the audience that's receiving it. But that's my hope for the future.
Yeah, and I think just sort of highlighting what you said about like the 80s, like if you'd have said that in the 80s, it'd be like, well, how am I going to do that? But now the technology is such that the doors are wide open for experimentation and sort of cross collaboration with different people. So it's a lot more, easier to go down that route and formulate a structure and a plan moving forward for your career, definitely.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
John, you'll be pleased to know that actually Isaac and I just got a piece written for us for WPG, and it has key signatures. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, I'll let him know.
Yeah, great. So, I suppose we talked about you in the past and your views. Obviously, we're in a sort of situation over the last couple of years which is unprecedented. But how are you sort of seeing things moving forward from now in terms of like upcoming projects you've got? I know you've got a concerto you've written for Alexei. Is that right?
Yeah, that was premiered yesterday, and it's probably being played in Hamburg as we speak. The second.
Oh wow! Okay, great. Yeah, because Alexei's one of the well, so is Evelyn actually, one of the coaches for WPG. So they're going to be working with these guys. So,
just a few hours ago, he and I were video calling. He was driving between Berlin and Hamburg to the next performance.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah. I did see his diary. I think he's in Dusseldorf as well at some point. Am I right?
Yeah, in November. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I mean, just talk to us a little bit about sort of any further upcoming projects and what's on the horizon for you.
Sure. So I've been writing a lot of concertos the last 3 years. You know, I left university teaching 3 years ago. I was 25 years there, and as a professor, and the things in the world have been going so well for me in terms of composing that I was at a moment where I could choose to go freelance, which is what I've done, and it was absolutely the right decision. And I've written a huge amount of music since then. So I've written a lot of concerti the last 3 years. I just had a few weeks ago a quadruple percussion concerto premiered in Cologne, and that was with the Funkhaus Orchestra and a group called Repercussion, a quartet. And it was for 4 percussionists, orchestra, backing track, an epic backing track, live electronics, and everybody had click. The whole orchestra had click.
Wow.
And was amplified. And I was using things like sub bass, you know, to drop the bottom end of the orchestra down another octave and all kinds of things. That was hugely exciting to do and really successful. The outcome was amazing, which is great when you think of what could go wrong in a project like that, you know, when you're putting it on. And so that was a fantastic outcome. Alexei's premiere last night was absolutely astonishing. Right? His playing was amazing, and the orchestra was fantastic. So I've just been super lucky to always be working with, if you think, I started writing for percussion with Evelyn. You know, so my journey has been kind of there all this time. But to answer your question, I've got one more percussion concerto to write. I'm just starting it today, in fact. It's a double percussion concerto for Fabian Ziegler and Luca Staffelberg, who are in Switzerland. And when I finish that, I don't have any large projects. I've said no to a whole lot of large projects because I'm getting more into chamber music and smaller group writing. And I think there is a kind of practicality about that going forward, which is I think that you're more likely to get that music played and more performances of each piece if you're writing for smaller groups or even individuals. It's probably temporarily the smarter way going forwards. So that's my feeling just about the impact of the pandemic on the immediate future of live performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can very much relate to that with like the LA Phil concerto me and Jason did like a few years back with Joe Pereira. He wrote sort of a very large scale like duo concerto, and at the time, you know, it was quite a spectacle. Just you didn't really have to play anything just because it looked amazing. But you know, LA have obviously very well equipped, but taking that sort of to other places, it's quite a difficult challenge to sort of, you know, propose that in the first place. So I think there is a, you know, a potential benefit to sort of structuring who you write for and the method that you write for it. And yeah, absolutely.
There is a practicality around the whole management of career, you know, in terms of having performances. And you know, I've just finished last year. I wrote a piece called Atalanta, which is for piano, vibraphone, and backing track, and that was written for Fabian Ziegler in Switzerland. And he immediately made a really terrific video that went up and has been seen a lot. And I'm selling that piece through my own website, which is another aspect of my career development, which is I've taken control of a lot of things. And that piece, it's as they say, been flying off the shelf. You know, it's incredible because it's really manageable. The piano and the vibes don't need to be amplified. There's a very simple way of setting up the technology in the ears and through the PA. Like, it's really straightforward. And I think more and more about how to make it as easy as possible for performers putting pieces on. Actually, to respond to your note about that double concerto, the one I'm writing, I've actually decided to create a modest percussion concerto with Mozart instrumentation. So just very small orchestra, and the soloists, one plays marimba, one plays vibraphone, and that's it. You know, to just rein the whole thing in.
Yeah.
And it also puts a lot more pressure on the material. So the material has to speak without all of the sound design that can go into concerto.
Puts a lot more pressure on the musicians as well.
That's
sometimes.
right. Yeah, that's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a bit of a test for everyone, isn't it? Since you can't really just wow your way out of it. It has
That's
to be-
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, one other thing that I might just throw in, if that's okay, is
Yeah.
I get asked sometimes, why have I written so much for percussion? You know, what's
That
the
was actually
attraction?
my next question. Yeah.
Especially given I've never played, you know, and am unlikely to ever play in percussion. It's because the music that I get excited about when I write is usually quite fast. It's usually quite detailed in terms of micro rhythms within beats, you know, the way subdivisions work and the way accent layers, you know, work together to create shapes and so on. And the players that can do that better than anyone else are percussionists. Because when you learn percussion, I have spent so much time looking at snare drum H's, you know, studying all of that snare drum study content, because it's the most sort of micromanaged detail in rhythm that you can come across. And I find that for me is where the raw materials are lying. They're in that kind of world. And so I'll pull that into my composing. And then if you think the next instrument that is as precise and able to deal with subdivisions in that way is the piano. And so that's why there's piano and percussion a lot. And why I've written way less for strings and wind and brass, because they are not as naturally inclined to create this kind of precision at high speed and interaction between parts that you can hear really clearly because of the transients and the attacks that you get out of the percussion instruments and the piano. So that's really what's drawn me to it.
Great. Any more questions, guys?
Oh, I have one.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to name a piece, and if you think if it's important to have the right title, maybe?
Yeah, well, the second part of that I'll answer first. I think it's extremely important, you know, and there's something about having a good title. I've just seen it makes such a difference.
Mm.
When I was younger, I thought, I'm not going to bother with titles. The music should speak for itself. I mean, the music will or won't speak for itself regardless. You know, when people hear it, they will react to the music. But the thing about having a great title is that it can draw people to finding out more about the piece. You know, so that if you're online and you're scrolling through a whole lot of options for repertoire, and there's a piece with a title that stands out, you might go, well, what's this? And it might just lead you to click and go and find out more about the piece. So that's one thing. The other thing is when it's played at a concert, for audience members to be walking out of a hall going, oh, do you remember that piece Atalanta? And they'll sort of remember the title. It sticks in the head more as well. And then there's the other thing where a title can really evoke something for a listener before they hear it. So my double concerto, View from Olympus, it just has something, there's a resonance around that title that matches the content. And so when you hear it, you go, oh, the Greek gods, Olympus, oh, my summer holiday on the Greek islands. You know, there's all of the stuff that comes up when people are listening. So as a trigger, a title can be hugely important. And then to answer the first part, which is how long does it take to come up with a title? I sometimes struggle enormously with it, really, really struggle with it. And other times the title will come while I'm writing it. But I can tell you that it's almost, I think maybe never come before I've written a piece. I don't come up with the title first because I don't know what the piece is going to be.
I've just got one last one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, out of the pieces you've written, which one do you like the most, and which one do you dislike?
Look, I think most composers would possibly give you the same answer, which is the piece I love the absolute most of all the music I've ever written is the one I just finished.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm the closest to it.
Mm.
And it's kind of a living, breathing part of me right now. It's very interesting that there can be this journey with works where you create them, they exist, no one else has heard them, and so you're the sole custodian of that piece. You're the one keeping it alive, and then it enters into the world. It goes into the public domain. And so a piece like One Study, One Summary has been played a lot. There are a lot of videos, a lot of recordings. it no longer feels like it's my piece. You know, it feels like it's in the world now. It's like you have a kid, they grow up and they leave home. You know, so there's that thing. I'm still connected, but they're not with me anymore. And that's a very different feeling around a piece of music. You feel kind of proud of it, but not as connected to it because it's like it's somebody else's now. So there's that. In terms of a favorite piece, it's always, I've got to tell you, it's always the piece I've just finished. And I've just finished a solo piano piece with no backing track or anything. It was very hard to do because piano is the worst, because it has the best repertoire. It's very hard to enter into the world of solo piano. But I'm very, very happy with it, and I feel very strongly connected to that.
Great. I've just got one more question, if I may, just for maybe some of the younger viewers actually watching, sort of about how to have a mindset for writing for anything, not necessarily percussion, but how to be confident with the ideas that you have. Because I know certainly when I was at college, I used to try and write stuff, and I thought, oh, that sounds really good, and then I'd come back the next day and I'd be like, I'm not sure anymore. And it's just having that sort of confidence and the right mindset to believe in the journey and therefore be able to expand on that. I found quite often, and I know many people do, sort of writer's block almost.
Yeah. So the answer to that, I think, it's a relatively deep one, which is, it's really what is going to motivate you to keep working on your material? That's really the question, right? What will motivate you so that you can't leave it alone, that you just have to keep working on it? There's something everybody's got to figure out for themselves. And this goes back to an earlier question in the conversation about sincerity and authenticity. You know, that I think that you can, and probably you should, and probably can only really write music that you love, that you really feel strongly connected to. And if you don't, then keep working at creating something, however small, even if it's just an idea, that you're totally in love with, that you think is amazing, that you really like it, and you're playing it over and over again because you just love it so much. That you have to find your way to that first, because it's no good trying to develop material that you're not really strongly connected to. And I think this is basically the problem that most people have, and especially if you work with software that has awful playback. Like, you know, the endless number of experiences I've had with students arriving with, say, a Sibelius, which is a great piece of software, but playback-wise, it's not the greatest. You know, and they turn up and it's playing you a string quartet with these, I have to say it, relatively awful string sounds. And you can see that they're completely uninspired, but I'll be looking at their material going, actually, this is really good. It's really good. It just sounds awful because of the playback. And so you have to create an environment in which what you're hearing sounds great first and foremost. So you're able to be okay with the sound of it. And then you need to be in love with it. And then if you get to that, even if it's 2 bars of music, even if it's that little, then you go, what's the next bar? And then you create the 3rd bar and you go, I still love all 3 bars. I'm going to try and write a 4th bar. And you keep doing that. But the core thing is to love it all as you're writing it, as it extends. You never let go of that one thing, which is your connection to it. And that's harder. It's a lot harder than just working from here. Because you know how it is. It's very easy to get wrapped up in, oh, this is a very interesting idea. Oh, if I do this, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, gosh, isn't it amazing if I turn it upside down and put it through some sort of filter of some kind? Yeah, all of this stuff, it's all very interesting, that stuff, but it won't sustain the creative process. The creative process is sustained by being inspired by and loving what you do. And I think what happens, I've seen it happen a lot, people give up too quickly on that core primary step, which is getting to something that you really love, and then trusting yourself, you know, which is, if you love it, that's reason enough.
Yeah, I suppose that's the same with anything though, isn't it? Like just having the patience, the perseverance and the belief.
That's right. Yeah. And there's always going to be backtracking and disappointment and failure. They're given, those things. You just say they're preordained elements of the process. So you don't let those things get you down because they're inevitable. But what you do is you take the victories, which is when you come up with a bit more and it's really terrific and you really love it. I'm really talking about the way it works for me. And of course, there are other ways.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I suppose this takes us on to the virtual project, which, you know, I've always been a really keen admirer of your music, as you know, and I think it's 2019 we did Kyoto. We performed that around the Baltics, which went down really well. And I thought, you know, to get in touch and see if you've got anything that might work well virtually with people. Obviously, we've got issues with so many. I don't know how many countries. I think we've got 11 or 12 countries represented, maybe 10 this time. So it's quite a logistical thing happening. But you've very kindly sort of suggested a new piece, Coolish Zane, which I know the guys have really enjoyed working on, and Jose is currently editing as we speak, or is about to. So maybe you could tell us just a little bit about the piece, the concepts, and sort of the idea behind it. That'd be great.
Yeah. Terrific. Yeah. So I have a really fantastic relationship with Michael Burrett, who I assume you know who he is.
Yeah.
So Michael is a fantastic guy, and we've had several projects that we've worked on together. We've never met in person. You know, we've done it all long distance. But Michael at one point wanted to create a project that was for a concerto for him. And we talked about it, and he really liked the idea of taking a different approach to the idea of concerto. And so we sort of threw ideas around, and we came up with this idea that it would be a digital concerto. You know, that there would be a soloist accompanied by a quartet, which was kind of like a rhythm orchestra or percussion orchestra role. And then around that would be this backing track that would provide a whole lot of other context, you know, and environments, sonic landscapes and so on. And once we got to that, I got very excited about it as an idea, as a way of working. And in fact, I really enjoyed the creation of the work. And so the idea was that the soloist would be a mallet player, and around them would be 4 players that played a whole range of instruments, including mallets, but also other kinds of percussion. And then in the backing track, it was whatever came to me during that time. So there ended up being 3 movements in this piece, and the first one, which is the one you're looking at, is called Her Alchemy. And the reason it has that title, it's no great reason, but it works for the piece. I was at the time exploring a piece of software called Alchemy, and within it has, as these libraries do, thousands of sounds. And I started exploring these sounds, and I found some very beautiful samples of women's voices. And so I thought, well, actually, why don't I limit what I have in the backing track to women's voices? And so I found a whole lot of different things that were just fantastic, and especially when put together, and especially when combined with percussion, there just seemed to be this beautiful marriage of sensibility and emotion. And so it ended up being Her Alchemy. That's the way that the title came about. And then, as you know, there's, Jose, you'll know that there's a wild solo part going through that whole movement, and it does this thing that I find I've done a few times now. The solo part starts on the marimba, and it's great because the marimba is, in some ways for me, it's really great as a solo percussion instrument, like on its own. And so when the marimba is in the piece, there's not too much going on around it. But then once the piece starts picking up steam and there's more happening, the soloist switches to the vibes, because I think of the vibes more as a solo instrument. And there's something about the way that I've heard Gary Burton play the vibes, you know, and there's just something about the way it can kick out a melody and the way that accented and non-accented notes relate to each other in a melodic context on the vibes, which the marimba is different. For me, the marimba is like, in the percussion world, the marimba is the piano. You know, it's the one instrument that's kind of complete, where you can play a whole piece, low and high. The whole texture is covered on the instrument. I don't know that there's any other percussion instrument that equals that. But the marimba, for me, in a really dynamic setting, it kind of loses power in terms of competing with everything else. And I don't like hard mallets on marimbas. For me, it gets too xylophony. You know, it changes the quality of the instrument. And one of the beautiful things about marimba is the mid to low register for me. It's like magic, you know, that whole area of the instrument. And so I think in the third movement of this piece as well, the same thing happens. It starts on marimba and then it switches to vibes once it really starts cooking. So that's kind of what I can say about it. I've sort of lost my thread here because the answer was too long. But is there anything else about it that you want to ask?
No, I mean, has Michael performed it already?
Yeah, he gave the premiere actually maybe three or 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
I can add one thing. I can add one thing about it, which is Michael set up a consortium of commissioners for the work, so it will get 6 world premieres, and Michael's given the very first one as lead commissioner. There's also a video that Omar Carmenatis has put up on YouTube now, so you can see the whole piece if you want to check that out.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's a terrific video that's been studio recorded, like a proper studio thing. So that's definitely worth checking out, and there are more premieres to come.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll eventually, when we get to the concert, as I say, I've not decided which one it will be in yet, but I will let you know. We'll live stream that one. The quality hopefully will be okay, but then I will do a HD version of it, which we'll put up as well, so it'll be a lot better for people to see individually, and you can share that as you will. So for people watching that perhaps don't know as much about John Psathas's music, I thought it'd be good just as a little outro. We'll come back in a minute and just say our final farewell, but maybe just to see Jose play a little bit of One Study, if that's okay with you guys. Got to work out how to do this now. There we go. All right, so great, thanks, Jose.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Is everyone still with me? Oh, there we go. That's better, isn't it? I should have done that from the beginning. Yeah, great job. Well done. Very good. Very nice. So thank you so much for joining us today, John. Guys, is there anything else you wanted to add to the interview today?
No, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, just a quick one. Kuda sign, what does it mean?
It's taken from one of the Dune books, the Frank Herbert science fiction series, Dune.
It's very in fashion at the moment, yeah.
It is, yeah. The movie's coming out. I cannot wait. I'm a huge fan of those books. There's 6 of them, the original series, and I've read them in my lifetime about 30 times, all 6 books, and I know them really well. And the title, Coolish Sign, it kind of refers, I think it's slightly made up in terms of language, but what it refers to is this is as good as it gets, and so I wonder if that's a statement about the world today. But so the third movement of of the piece is really the one that reflects the title, because it has a kind of North African, Moroccan, Tunisian groove in it, especially in the second half, that kind of connects more to the title.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a very positive note
Absolutely.
to have at this moment as well. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, thank you all. Thank you all. That was fantastic.
No, thank you, and happy composing for the rest of the day.
Oh, thanks so much.
Do you write like all day, or just do like a few hours here and there?
No. I can do 12, 14-hour days, weeks in a row. I've got a place where I am right now. I'm by the sea, and I'll just beyond my computer here is the ocean. And I come here and I'm on my own, and I'll spend weeks just working around the clock. It's just, for me, it's an absolute obsession, you know. And a piece, for instance, one study, one summary, or coolest design, they take months and months of really long days working with all of that detail to get things exactly the way that I want to hear them. So I'm very obsessive when it comes to writing. Yeah.
Wow, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be in touch at some point.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, and best of luck with the whole series of events that you've got lined up.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm still learning everything right now, but I think today's been all right. So that's one tick on my book. So yeah, okay, great. Take care, John. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, all right. See you later.
See you now. Bye.